Welcome to the Moga Bar Show. My name's Gabe. On today's show, we're going to be speaking with Marina Paul, author of Becoming a Superhero. Marina is a former collegiate athlete at Georgetown University, where she was co-captain of the women's soccer team. Marina is going to speak to us today about her journey from a collegiate athlete to where she is today, an author writing a book during one of the most troubling times in human history.
Something that I learned from the women that I interviewed, and something I specifically looked for were women who, of course, like they're successful by definition in their position, whether, they're named the CEO or the general counsel or a lieutenant colonel or something. But I think what I found so admirable about them was that they were those leaders from the sidelines, right? Like they were in these high positions, but they made leadership seem like it was all team first oriented. And even if things weren't going well for them personally, like they were still able to show up to enable and their teams to be successful and however possible. And that speaks volumes to me. That like you just said, speaks so much more about your character and just I guess what you can bring to the table than sort of any accolade that you can achieve. And that's really where this definition of superheroism comes from. It's like finding the best within yourself, no matter what situation you're in, so you can bring out the best in others. And that's, I think, what makes our world go round.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the powerful messages is that you showed it from multiple perspectives. You have, this athlete, co-captain, captain of a D1 soccer team at Georgetown University, sidelined with a really bad injury. This is an injury that not too long ago people were not coming back from. And, you came back, but you had to be on the sidelines. You weren't starting anymore. Everyone else in your position, you want to be out on the pitch. You want to be out there because that's who you are. That's what has defined you for so long, because you're still a young person at this time. I mean, you're still young now, but you were even, younger then. So you're still very much in that mindset, athlete, prime of your life, athletic life, excuse me, prime of your athletic career. And, you're still an alpha in that sense, because athletes are very much alphas. You want to be out there. You think you can do it all, injuries aside, we can do it all. And that's humbling. And that takes a lot of introspection, I think, because you have to see that for yourself. But I think being able to show that vulnerability to your teammates, to little girls that maybe are watching you play or not play, and be like, why isn't Marina playing? Why isn't she out there? I think it's a powerful conversation. It's a powerful message. Not everyone can just come back out and be out there, on the field, on the court, on the pitch, whatever their circumstances are, and play right away and be the starter right away. Sometimes you have to work towards it. And sometimes that work isn't necessarily all physical. What was the mental aspect like for you? Because that was hard.
Yeah. So it's so funny because I was reflecting on this. So my book launched April 28th, 2021. And it was so interesting. I was like, what is this feeling going to be like? And so I was reflecting on, and it was like a big downer, and we can talk about that. But I was comparing it to something else I'd experienced, and it was really my injury experience. It's like this, you overcome this big thing, talking about an injury. You write a book, and then you're like, okay, great. Now, like, you just overcome. So I think the process of like writing a book mentally and coming back from an injury were oddly very similar to me. And that it was the first, being injured and tearing my ACL twice in 9 months. That was the first time I couldn't really physical my way out or athletic my way out of something. Of course, like you do your daily routines, and I was like very, very habitual, like very gung ho about like every single thing that I did, down to like all my nutrition, my sleep, and like everything. Cause I was like, I'm doing everything to get back as best as possible. And then I ended up tearing my ACL again. And so it really was like this, it felt like mental trauma a little bit, just because it's like, what did I do wrong? And sometimes I just really learned that sometimes you can do everything in your power and things still end up as versus they could have, which was for me blowing out my knee again at the end of my career when I was actually starting to do really, really well. So I think for me mentally, it was the first time I had to sit with myself and be like, okay, it was a lot of the identity piece of, oh, I'm an athlete. Like, I don't know what else to do or how to think or how to like literally move without doing what I've always done. And so you have the physical aspect of it, but you also have that mental of like, I need to mentally overcome this. I need to mentally be a leader and find that within myself and find like who I am if I don't have that physical aspect of me. And then relating that to writing a book, it was like the first time I couldn't go, crush it on a fitness test and then a book was the result. Or, I couldn't like crush it and then I win a national championship. Like, you are sitting with yourself for hours on end, rewriting sentence after sentence. And it was just like, took me way back to the injury piece where it's like, okay, I literally need to sit in this room and figure out like who I am or figure out what writer I am, figure out what type of person I am. So yeah, I mean, the mental aspect is deep and it requires you to really, really be honest with yourself, but also show yourself a lot of compassion through the process.
Did you find, I know for myself personally, I find it very hard to show myself compassion. I'm extremely hard on myself. Do you find that you're the same way, that you were not being compassionate toward yourself? Like, how did you overcome that? Did you go to anyone for help? I know you're close to your family. So how was that, for you?
Yeah. So that has probably been my biggest battle in my life. And I write a lot about this in my book. But for a while, I tied my worth, and I still do to some extent, to my performance. And I didn't allow myself sort of this freedom to perform. Like, everything was tied to results. And I think as athletes, like, that's ingrained in us. And that's what enables us to be successful a lot of the times. But to me, I did it so much, it was at a detriment that I wholeheartedly believed in perfection. I was the person who said, I'm not a perfectionist, but I was completely a perfectionist. Or I'm not a perfectionist, I just want everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
So I think like as athletes, we have to kind of find that like not common ground, but like fine line with ourselves where it's like, I'm going to perform the best I can, do my best today and try to get 1% better every day. But at the same time, like, allow myself the freedom to perform and trust that I've been, doing the work and everything I can be, and allow myself to genuinely show up as myself and not this idea of what I think I should be. And so, yeah, I would say that was showing myself compassion, was a massive struggle when I played. And then after I stopped playing, it was so hard because I leaned so much on sports to bring me fulfillment, bring me happiness. And then when I didn't have those, I ultimately went and saw a therapist. And that was really helpful. And then I just it's slowly putting the pieces together and getting to know yourself. And I think showing yourself compassion is a forever journey. I don't think you can, for me at least, I don't think I can ever like fully be like, I'm so compassionate, or I show myself compassion 100% of the time, all the time. Like, I love myself, and that's definitely for me never, I don't think, going to be my truth. So it's hard. Therapy, talking with friends, being more vulnerable, and knowing that like I wake up worthy, not necessarily that I have to earn that worthiness.
Nice. Very good. I love that you said that. I want to touch on the therapy aspect. Athletes specifically in general, but any alpha personality has a problem admitting either that they need therapy or that they're going to therapy, or even speaking about it. I think there's such a huge stigma attached to it. Usually no, I don't need that, I'm good, I'm just gonna hustle through it, or I'm just gonna keep muscle through and keep moving along. What is your advice to anyone that is potentially struggling with either physical injury, mental injury, that needs that sort of pick me up or needs that sort of extra bit of professional advice that they're sort of afraid to get. We all have friends that we talk to, that we give advice or that we lean on for advice. But after a while, it does become a broken record where you're like, you need more than I can give you. And it's a disservice for me to tell you like not to go there. Like, you need this. What's your advice to them? Because I think for, young girls, young athletic girls and boys as well, especially for men who need to be the alpha, they need, look at me, I'm big and bad. What's your advice to all of them? Because I think one of the things that I really enjoyed so far is I think your book applies to everyone. It's not, yes, you've interviewed a lot of women across different fields, but it applies to everyone. If you just open your mind, I think it applies to men and women, boys and girls, young and old alike. And I think, that's something that is really sometimes hard to do, but it shouldn't be, because I think it should be just open your mind and it's there.
Mm-hmm. You've touched on so many points, and I want to start with this idea of being tough, because it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about with worth. But I always tell myself whenever I get into a situation, like, just be tough, like, tough it out, like, you're fine. I feel like tough is like one of those words that every athlete like holds very dear to their hearts, because they're like, stick it out. I mean, as a former collegiate athlete, like, it's you have to be very tough to an extent. I think where we have to, again, figure out how far we go with that toughness is like, is it being detrimental to like our character and I guess what we can bring out of ourselves. Like, I think you can only be so tough until you're actually hurting yourself. It takes so much courage to get help. It really does. And it took me 8 years to finally say, like, knowing that I was going through stuff mentally, I was like, no, I'm just going to figure it out myself. That's the other thing, is like, we're so driven and independent, I think, as athletes, that we want to just like do everything on our own. But I think for me, it came down to knowing that, like, one, it never hurts to get help. Like, for example, we literally live, if you think about it, we literally cannot survive without other people. Like, whether you're going to the grocery store or, I don't know, filling your gas up, like, somebody has to be able to provide that for you to enable you to like survive. So we cannot live with other people. And once I realized that, and I was like, it's okay to also lean on other people for help, just as much as I would have leaned on my teammates for help at some point, or my coaches. Every single person has watched film who's an athlete, or, everyone has received feedback, or like, I don't know, just built relationships. And I just think if you put it in sort of if you frame it like that and saying like, hey, I'm just doing this because I want to feel whole and I want to feel happiness all the time, and I want to work through some like deep rooted things that I have going on. For me, framing it in sort of like that sports minded way was really, really helpful for me to be like, it's not weakness to go. And so that's what I want to compare, is like the idea of toughness and weakness. And I write about it, like, sort of the metaphor I use is, when you tear your ACL, the first thing the orthopedic surgeon says is to straighten your knee, because once you straighten it, like, that ensures like more so ensures full mobility in your leg. And so like being tough is like feeling the numbness, or not feeling numbness, feeling like the dull pain of like straightening your knee, having lighthearted conversations, getting help through a therapist, and like really feeling those emotions. And that's what tough means for me now. It's not this like numbing all of those sensations and all of those feelings so that you can't experience like all the joy as well. So I would just say, like, do what's best for you. Therapy worked for me for a while, but I'm also like a doer. And so I like, part of my therapy also is like writing this book and getting everything out. But don't be afraid to get help. I think especially like there's so much with gender stereotypes, especially with men. I have an older brother who was a professional athlete, and like, I just saw with him and his teammates, they always had to be manly. And it's just like, it's really sad, because I just think if they were able to open up more, like, they would just offer this world even more.
Yeah, I agree. As a former athlete, I can completely agree with that. It's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, but it is a liberating thing once you begin doing that, not only
Mm-hmm.
in your professional life, but in your personal life as well, with your relationships that you may have, spouse, children, whatever you may have one day. It really is a liberating feeling.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
your book. You've interviewed a
Woo.
lot of interesting and diverse women. And for this book,
Mm-hmm.
how did this come up and how did you get a hold of them all?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was pretty savage about it. I started my career working for a startup so one of my best friends from college had started this company with his friend or with his brothers. And I think what I learned from them is just to be as scrappy as possible. When you want something, ask for it. And the way they built their business really and like got investors and got people interested and, professional athletes sign on was they would be unashamed to reach out to anyone in any mechanism. And so I learned that through them. And so honestly, like everything from a DM to a mom's cousin's sister to anything that I just found some women, I randomly found them so passionate, or I was so passionate about what they were doing and was like, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to get an interview with them. I also think I tried to be more realistic about it. Like I knew I wasn't going to get Oprah. I knew I wasn't going to get, Michelle Obama or even Glennon Doyle, who wrote Untamed, which I was reading, these like super renowned authors. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna find these like local, I call them local, they're still national superheroes, international superheroes too, but women who people could potentially interact with, or they could be their boss's boss's boss. So it was like a little bit, one, it was realistic that I could reach them, and two, it's like they're still doing big things that we can all learn from. So, and then I think it was really important to me as I had a sharp sports angle, but then I realized I was like, you know what? I think this is a leadership style that can be applied everywhere. And like you said, even if men read it, I don't think it's more towards women, mostly because women haven't really been written about in their leadership styles. But I think I interviewed across the spectrum because I really wanted to showcase that, all of these women are doing cool things, and this type of leadership can apply to any industry.
What was your favorite interview, or who was your favorite interview?
Oh my gosh. Well, so I
I
think
know I
that
put you on the spot.
I know, and they were all so cool because I literally admire them all so much. I think one of the ones where I like literally was so nervous but excited about was Jordan Weber. She was the Olympic gold medalist, 2012 London Olympics, for gymnastics. She also was a victim of Larry Nassar, and she is the youngest ever head coach of an NCAA team ever, and
Nice.
she happens to be obviously female. She coaches University of Arkansas right now, and she just was like so cool. And you're like, wait, but you're this like international superstar. You're just like super normal. And like, I mean, normal in the sense that like you could just feel like you could get a cup of coffee with her and she's so cool, but like obviously not normal in what she's accomplished. And she's a head coach at 23. Like I'm still getting my stuff together and I'm wait, so that was so awesome. I think it's so hard to say. Miss Valerie Condos Field was a head coach of UCLA gymnastics team for 29 years, won 7 national championships, is one of the most successful head coaches ever in the history of college sports. And her personal mentor was also John Wooden, because they overlapped when he was still coaching at UCLA. So she spit out so much wisdom, and she had this interview where she was talking about her athletes as superheroes. And so I asked her more about that. And I remember it was like the weekend after July 4th, 2020. And I was like, can we talk more about this topic? And that's literally how I came up with the title of my book. So I think that one kind of helped set up the tone for the rest of
Nice.
my book. But yeah, you're just like, each one of those women had so many cool things to say that you're just like, can I just like talk to you forever. Can I put a reoccurring meeting invite on your calendar? We just like
It's like, I
just
just want to
talk
keep
and I'll just
talking to you.
listen. Yeah,
That's all.
exactly.
That's
But that was
awesome.
great. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's very, I think it's great to get these stories out there. Like, these are, everybody knows who's Jordan Weber is, or should know. And, but not a lot of people get to hear certain conversations that they have, certain insights that they have. Like you said, youngest head coach or gymnastics head coach in NCAA history. That's amazing. Like, who knows that? They know she's an Olympic gold medalist. They don't know this now because it's like, okay, you're not competing anymore, sort of out of sight, out of mind. But no, she's still competing, and I think in a more profound way, because she's shaping the lives of, younger athletes, and she's helping them. And because of what she went through, unfortunately, she has an insight that she can help shape these young girls' lives in a way and empower them in a way that maybe a regular coach would not be able to do.
Yeah.
You also had some very powerful leaders. You had Coach Linz at Georgetown, who sort of kind of helped snap you back into let's talk about the power of a good coach. What did that
Yeah.
mean for you, and what does that mean, for other people?
And I want to say too, I was just lucky with such great coaches at Georgetown. I think just knowing a lot of college coaches and a lot of my friends who've grown up in the athlete world, like there's a lot of great coaches and there are a lot of not so great coaches. And I just was lucky to have all very great coaches. So, but Lindsay, it was so interesting. She's only 2 years older than me at the time. She had this approach to coaching where she was like, I am going to make sure every single athlete is seen every single day. Because you're with each other, 5-6 hours a day outside of class, whether it's in film, practice, lifting, whatever. And she just went up to every single player, no matter if you were the head scorer and like a, first team All-American or you're a walk-on. She would say, how are you today, kid? Like every single person, all 28 of us. And so I think in that regard, like I had never experienced coaching to that degree before and been like, wow, she like genuinely wants to get to know me. I thought like coaches, I think a little bit when you get to that competitive level, coaches, they're cool, but like they really like, especially later in the season, really care about like the starting group and just making sure they're healthy and, but she wanted to make sure the whole team was on board, on mission. And she just like genuinely loves people. And so with that, I learned a lot. I think the timing couldn't have been more perfect because she started coaching us right when I had both my injuries. And she just really taught me about like, it's not really about how you perform. It is about how you perform in the field, but it's more so about the character, the person you want to be when you look back at yourself in the mirror every morning. And I didn't like myself, especially when I was injured. And so I also didn't take the time to get to know myself. I was like, I knew I was like super athletic and I knew I could, figure it out and just keep practicing and try and do well in school and all that. You kind of I wasn't going through the motions, but I hadn't really experienced like true adversity yet. And when I did, she was just like, hey man, this is your opportunity and you can, and she led me by example. I was like, I'm just going to try my best to be like Lindsay. And it's not like I might not be getting everything I want, but I think that's when you learn the most about yourself as well. And so I think going back to your point about how important it is to have coaches and leaders that you want to be like, that's really why I wrote this book. I had Lindsay and I had a couple other mentors in my life where I was like, you are really phenomenal. But I also saw a lot of bad leadership. I saw a lot of bad leadership in the world. I was like, you do not want your team to succeed. It's all about you, or it's about some other alternative, like ulterior motive that you have. And it's not like, I don't feel better, or I don't leave better knowing. I think the success of a leader is when your people can outperform you someday, or they leave more successful than when they came in. And so I think a great leader prepares their team to be more successful than they were when they arrived.
Nice.
And that's really what I learned from them.
Nice. Excellent. How are you applying that now? You've left Georgetown, you've left your athletic career, behind. Now you're a management consultant.
Mm-hmm.
You're a podcast host as well. How are you applying this to, your current life? Because
Yeah.
everything is sort of applicable and transferable. How do you apply this?
Yeah. So the one thing that I really like about consulting or that kind of nature is like you are literally always on project teams. And I went to business school, so we're just used to always doing group projects, and I love them because you're like literally like your grade is based on how well you work as a team. And so what's cool about the nature of this is of consulting is that you are so right now I'm like working for the state of California and working with social workers every day to try and get our welfare system um into like move us all into one welfare system. And like you're working with real people's lives. Like a third of the state of California like really like depends on our welfare system. And so I think for me, it's like finding a greater purpose in my work. And then two, it's like, how do I take what I've learned from being on a team to be able to bring joy every day to people's lives, making sure that like you don't know what's going on in people's personal lives and you don't know, I guess, the term like what they bring in their bags to lunch every day. So it's like, how do I still bring that motivation to work? And then also, I think something that's really important, especially in our current climate, is like as a white female, I think it's really important for me to understand my privilege and the power that that kind of affords me, unfortunately. But fortunately, and that like I have the opportunity to give a platform or try and open up doors for other men and women who are minorities. And I need to become more abreast to that, what that opportunity is, and really be able to speak up for people who are marginalized in the workplace. And that's something I also talk about a lot in my book is like this idea of sisterhood and this idea of teamwork is I have to be able to see where, while I only maybe deal with misogyny, other women might be dealing with racism and misogyny and sexism. So I need to be able to understand where those doors, where I guess those barriers are for other women, and trying to open those up and speak out for them. So that's something else I try to stay privy to. I think it's a lot more in the workplace than it exists a lot more in the workplace than it does in sports. But yeah.
Okay. I want to touch on this a little bit. You said as a white woman, you try to understand the privilege that you have. You open your book with a very powerful paragraph talking about breathing. Obviously, these days, breathing, we've come to associate it with "I can't breathe," the unfortunate last words of George Floyd, Eric Garner. It's become a rallying cry for so many that are underprivileged.
Mm-hmm.
What does breathing mean to you? How has the last year affected you? Because you were writing your book within this last year and you got to see the turmoil. How did that impact you, impact your writing, also impact your frame of mind while you were being introspective and trying to think about like you were saying, what am I doing to help others that don't have what I have or don't have the availability to the things that I have?
Yeah. That's such a good question. So to answer your first question, or I guess the first part is, I mean, this last year had a tremendous impact on this book. And honestly, I don't know if I would have written a book if it hadn't been for this year. But I found that, things happen in life and we have a choice for how we can respond to them. And my response to how I think, especially white women collectively, because I feel like I can speak on behalf of white women, we have a responsibility and obligation to our communities and our people who don't look like us to speak out for them and use our platforms. And, we preach a lot, and I'm saying I generalize again, but like white women preach a lot about feminism, right? But it's not a blanket term for, I guess it used to be all about sort of this like white idea of feminism, just trying to get to the top, trying to steal a man's position. And I just don't necessarily agree with that approach, because we aren't taking into account what other women are going through. And I don't think we need a collective power of all genders and all races to be able to achieve equality. So there's that piece of it. And then I think that breathing, and I write that like breathing connects our subconscious to our conscious, is like what we do without noticing. Like we're supposed to, our body just breathes naturally without us having to think about it. But when you have a knee on your neck, you're trying to breathe consciously. And to me, it's like, when you think about it in regards to that, there are not many moments in life where I've had to think about breathing consciously. The only time I did was probably when I was like, on the ground with my knee torn up, and you feel like a knife just stabbed through it. That's like when I remember, like, okay, just breathe, like follow your breath, all that. But I wasn't potentially going to die or be murdered. And I think when we think about it as simple as something as breath and humanize it to that sort of level, we can begin to, white people will never comprehend what people of color have to go through. But I think we can start to, it humanizes it a little bit more for us and saying, wow, like imagine not being able, someone else hold your breath. So that's where that part really comes from. Mm-hmm. And then the last piece is really about this connection. Like at the end of the day, we all have to breathe. We all have to find the connection within ourselves and then find the connection between each other. And that's really what I think superheroism is about. It's like being able to build this connection because of our differences, with our differences, not like in spite of our differences, and really represent those, or be able to represent those however we want to, but also still, enjoy each other's presence.
I think that's very well said. And I have a couple of last questions. I don't want to take up all your time, but I do have a couple of follow-up questions. And I think, number one, I know what my getting to know you over these last few weeks, like I have, is my opinion of you is, what is your superpower?
I think that my superpower is that I'll never give up. And that's because, I try to never give up, because I know, and not to get super dark, but this is going to go to a dark place. I remember, so I struggled with eating disorders really bad throughout my college career, playing soccer. And the only thing that kept me alive, honestly, or kept me, functioning, was soccer. And I just remember being on my bathroom floor being like, I'm going to get out of this. I want to get out of this. And now being in the position where I am, to be able to look at that, knowing that like I can be in my darkest moment of not really wanting to survive, but still knowing and having that faith that I would climb out of it. And then, and so I think never give up. And then I truly, truly, truly try to live by, like, I really want to leave people better than I found them. Like if I had to leave this earth, tomorrow, I just want to make people feel good in who they are, because I lived so long not liking myself. And it was just so hard. And then two, because I just think it's awesome. I think people are awesome in themselves, and like letting people be themselves and not trying to control them is like, I don't know, it just makes life so much more fun and enjoyable. And you just get to, that's what it's all about for me. So
I think that's excellent. That sort of tracks with what I had my opinion of your superpower as being perseverance. So, after reading, all of your, comebacks from unfortunate knee injuries, but as well as, just seeing the way you persevered on the sidelines and helping your teammates, I think that sort of absolutely tracks. And then my last question, everything that I've read, speaking to you today, I really, really feel like your athletic career is not over. I really feel like in the future, there's going to be a Coach Paul. And is that something that you've thought about? I feel like you have so much to offer, is that something that you would think about or have thought about? Because I think that you have great insight from an athletic perspective, from an injured athlete perspective, from someone, suffering, with mental illness, or mental health issues, excuse me. And I think that you offer a lot. Is that something you would consider, have thought about?
Oh, thank you. That's something that I actually talked to Lindsay about when I was graduating. And I was in my first job and I was like, this is just not it for me. I'm not feeling it. I really miss sports. I mean, I literally try to play sports every day. I love them so much. And I just like love the idea of how to build teams. I don't think I would. So I'm actually working on something that is similar. So it's very much in the sports realm. It's with female athletes and it's coming out at the end of summer. But it has to do a lot with like the struggles that I went through that a lot of female athletes struggle with. So 1 in 3, it's reported that 1 in 3 female college athletes struggle with eating disorders and body image. And that's only that are reported. And so that obviously is weighed heavily on my life. And then in that regard, I don't think that women are properly equipped with clothing and just, I guess, swagger that like defines them. It's always been like something that has been curated, that's built for men, curated for women. So I would say coach in the regards of starting a company and sort of trying to like lead a team in that way, because literally everything I do in my life is built off of an athletic lifestyle or mindset that will never leave. And I'm sure that's the same for you. But I see I'm going back into sports, but it's not necessarily like in a sports field. I would love to coach like a little kids team and just like, because I think that would be so fun. But so you're close.
It was just a feeling, because I'm like, just talking to you, I'm like, you just have such a leader / coach vibe. I'm like, I could just totally see it. I was just like, well, that's cool. Marina, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me, being my first guest. So thank you so very much. I look forward to seeing everything that you're doing. Before you go, where can we find your book? Tell everyone where to find it, or at least everyone that's watching.
Yes. So you can type it in. It's on Amazon. It's called Becoming a Superhero by Marina Paul. And just type it in the search bar and it's there. It's kind of like a sunset rising. It's right now it's in ebook and paperback, and then this summer it's going to drop in hardcover.
Nice. So, very excellent. And where can people, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, you're awesome too. And I've enjoyed this process so much, getting to know you, and I can't wait to hear more about your story and learn everything.
Thank you.
And I think what you're doing is great. And putting yourself out there creatively is really, really tough. And so I really admire like the courage that you have to do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Where can people find you if they want to reach you directly?
Yeah. So I was like, should I get my phone number? No, but
no, that's not.
Yeah, it's like no. So I'm on Instagram and it's just my name at Marina Paul. It's probably the easiest, or LinkedIn is Marina Paul as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And yeah.